paper is going to continue a discussion of the ideas of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in kind of celebration over the next year, until our semi-quincentennial, and then hopefully every year after that. Semi-quincentennial plus one, and on down the years. These reflections are from a paper that I wrote called From Being and Good to Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Happiness, published in a journal called Lex Naturalis. And in the paper, what I'm trying to do is take the ideas from our founding document for our the United States' founding, the Declaration of Independence. Take that document. In that document, there is a discussion of a couple of our unalienable rights: the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And as a philosopher, my question is, what is the nature of those rights? How do they inhere in us? And what is the metaphysics and the metaethics behind them? And so in this video series, I've been walking through the metaphysical background, the metaphysical prolegomena, if you will, that is entirely commonsensically realistic, and also a metaethics that is concomitant, goes right together with the metaphysics of the founding. That is, if we are going to defend today and every day that the principles of the Declaration of Independence, which found our country and from which our Constitution and way of life continues here in the United States, we have to defend, absolutely must defend, the metaphysics and the metaethics that are behind them. So if you're going to continue to believe and apply into law and in our cultural way of life that we have unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, we cannot give up the metaphysics and the metaethics that are behind them. So in the first couple of videos, I walked through the metaphysics and then the metaethics. And in this video, I'm going to continue a discussion of not so much the logical structure of the arguments that maintain that being and goodness are identical in us and serve as the ground for our unalienable rights. I've done that kind of logical part of it. Here, I want to look at the soundness of these arguments and look at some of the epistemic or the knowledge claims that are involved in them, especially the premises. So again, this will be a defense of a broadly Thomistic metaethics and metaphysics that I think are necessary components to defending the unalienableness of the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And once you let that go, if that's gone, we can't sustain these as things that we can say that we know. We can say that, but in order to sustain them, we have to philosophically, intellectually, and even politically and juridically, in our system of laws and way of life, we need to understand them philosophically. Okay. So these are the four ways to good. These are Aquinas' four arguments to the identity of being good. And let's just jump into the paper. Okay, so Aquinas' four ways to good can be interpreted as clearly valid deductions. Four conclusions are nearly all similar. Being and goodness are the same in reality. And the third way emphasizes the full actuality of being and goodness understood as identical in reality. The arguments are excellent tools in clarifying the relationship between goodness and being. And I've argued above, following Stump and Kreutzmann's interpretations of these arguments are all deductively valid. However, none of them prove that goodness itself exists. Nor do any of these arguments show us how we know what goodness is. Someone might say, well, so what? That's just the nature of deduction. You got to start somewhere. When you offer a deduction, you can't just go on infinitely, right? You never get to your conclusion unless some things are given. Okay. The conclusions are about goodness, and since the arguments are deductive, there cannot be anything new in the conclusion that's not contained in the premises. These arguments don't prove that goodness exists. They simply assume that goodness exists, as at least one of the premises in each argument must be about goodness. So what's the problem? Okay, so here's kind of the problem or the puzzle. For Aquinas especially, and every truly commonsensical philosopher, and I take our founders to at least be that, more than that, they were at least that, the need for a proof or evidence to prove the truth of a premise containing the predicate term good is simply unnecessary. For those of us living well after modern skepticism and postmodern nihilism about the reality of the good, it seems that evidence for all premises containing the predicate good is a must. Thankfully, Aquinas gives us such a way to see that good and being overlap. Thus, seeing or direct rational insight comes in the form of an epistemology based on common sense empirical experience of being, that is existence itself, and goodness that is identical to it. So, okay, let me pause for a moment. In the Declaration, the founders say we hold these truths to be self-evident. Okay, so there's something right about that. But I think what Aquinas does is he shows us the self-evident nature of them. In other words, it's one thing to say that something is self-evident, but it's another thing to be able to explain how it is self-evident, or in what does that self-evidence consist. Okay, those are two different things. And I think Aquinas does the latter. And that really helps in clarifying the Declaration principle. The hint that Aquinas gives us is found in the text on which Stump and Kreutzmann base what I'm calling the second way, the argument from corruption resistance. In that text, Aquinas says several times, to be in act constitutes the nature of the good. Again, I'll repeat that. To be in act constitutes the nature of the good. By nature, the good of each thing is its act and perfection. So to give a justification for the truth of the premises that contain the predicate good in each of these four ways to good, one must consider carefully how we know being qua being itself through direct experience of ordinary common sense realities. And then this is kind of the self-evident part. Aquinas' common sense realist description of how we know being itself has directly built into it the possibility of direct awareness of goodness. Okay, in other words, when you're directly aware of anything that exists, you can be directly aware of its goodness. If you want to call that, self-evident, that's fine. But it may not be directly, immediately self-evident to everyone, and Aquinas helps sort that out. Aquinas' view about the ultimate nature of being qua being carry with it the very desirability that is referred to in premise 1 and premise 1 star in the first way above. By way of review, here's P1 and P1 star from the text of the first way. The essence of goodness consists in this, that it is somewhat desirable. Goodness is what all desire. Now remember, in order to solve the validity problem of the strong claim that existence and goodness overlap, we had to interpret all four premises of the argument as two converse categorical propositions. In this case, G was good, D was what all desire, which gives us P1 and P1 star, all G or D, and all D or G. Okay, that's just a bit of review from the first way. The puzzle here regarding the soundness of these arguments is this. Are P1 and P1 star in the first way true, and how do we know them? Okay, so now we're pushing Aquinas' argument here a little bit to say, hey, how do you know this? Like, how do you know these premises that all good are desirable and all desirable are good? Okay, so that's the question. It seems that P1 and P1 star are merely asserted based on an appeal to Aristotelian authority. Now, that would be unfortunate if that were the case. An argument with such a strong conclusion would surely need to rest on something more than an appeal to authority, though Aristotle is a pretty good authority to appeal to, even one is qualified as the philosopher, aka Aristotle. However, this is not the case for Aquinas. Rather, a broadly Thomistic route to understanding the very nature of being qua being through direct experience of ordinary common sense realities has directly built into it the possibility of direct awareness of how good is desirable. Now that's the self-evident part. Aquinas' view about the nature of ultimate being, about the ultimate nature of being qua being carries with it the very desirability that is referred to in P1 and P1 star. The important thing about this view of how we know being qua being is that it is not itself based on an argument. Okay? How do we know existence? You can't be argued into that. You have to see it. Thus, Aquinas' epistemology of being and epistemology of good are what Roderick Chisholm would call a particularist view. It's just a fact that we know many things. Two of the things we know without logical proof are being and goodness understood as that which all desire. Here is how. You might say, well, how do I know that? Sounds like a little kid. Yeah, well, how do you know? How do you know? How do you know? This is not going to end in iterative, infinite regress of iterative skepticism. As I argued above, when we are aware of any existing thing, we are directly aware through judgment that the existence of the thing is the actualization of its essence. Since we can directly see, intellectually see, that existence is essential exact actualization, then necessarily we can directly see that an essence actualized is a perfection of a quote-unquote desire, that is a teleological completion, an aphaetai in Greek, of an essence with respect to its own existence. By perfection, we mean the completion of a possibilia latent in the mere essence unactualized. All essences desire to exist. So let me try an example. This is where this video might get kind of weird. You might be thinking it's been weird all along, but it gets weirder. All right, ready? I'm going to give you an illustration of how we can see the nature of essential exemplification and the goodness that goes together with it, that's identical to it. By taking a local example here in Southern California, in San Diego, we can consider a local artifact, gustatory example of a California burrito. Now, if you don't know what a California burrito is, just Google it. I think it's got its own Wikipedia entry under burritos. So it's got its own little sub-entry of the California variety. And here's what a California burrito is constituted by. It's a combination of carne asada, which is kind of meat, seasoned meat, beef, pico de gallo, it's a kind of salsa, fries, sour cream, guacamole, at least those things. Usually, maybe you can put other things in it, but it's at least those, maybe beans or rice, some people do. And usually in a warm flour. I guess you can do a very large corn tortilla if you like, but usually a warm flour tortilla. So the actualized essence of a California burrito is more perfect than an imaginary one, and much better for lunch. Now, if you don't buy that, just ask yourself this: which is better for lunch, an imaginary burrito, a California burrito, or a real one? I guess if you're trying to lose weight, the imaginary one would be better. If you want to eat a burrito, the real one is much better. So through direct experiential awareness of any actually existing thing, necessarily we are aware of the perfections of the actualization of an essence in the thing experience. Since we're aware of this perfection, this completion of actualization that is present in all possible essences, we are aware not only of what an essence qua essence is, but we are also aware that any possible existence has a quote-unquote desire to exist. Now, a desire here is not like I want something. It's not like there's a little mind here. Sorry, Berkeley or whomever else is a strong idealist mentalist of some kind. Not all things think, only rational beings do. But by desire, we mean an amatness. So the California burrito has an amatness, a desire to exist. Now, at this point, Aquinas' appeal to the Aristotelian authority just sounds far more reasonable than an argumentum ad burritum, but a slight detour might help us get back on track. When Aquinas quotes Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics and says goodness is what all desire, bonum in Latin it's bonum est quod omnium appetunt, the Latin term appetunt is rendered in English as desire in some translations. This seems absurd at first. Burritos, Californialized, don't have desires. They don't have mental or emotional states at all, and they share this with many other things that exist. However, perhaps the Latin term appetunt might help. The Latin word here is where we derive our English term appetite. However, this doesn't seem much better than desire. Although California burritos are themselves appetizing, it still seems odd to say in English that the essence of a California burrito has an appetite. I might have an appetite for a California burrito, but California burritos, either actually or essentially, do not seem to have appetites for anything. So perhaps instead of looking at the Latin, a quick look at the Greek, from which the Latin term appetunt is in English is derived. The Greek term is aphaetai, which roughly means aim at in fighting or archery. Now this seems to help. The essence of a California burrito is a real possibly existing thing, right? Someone had to think it up, thought of it as a like, oh, this would be really good, right? And they think of it as a possibly existing thing, and then they put it together and make it actual. The essence of any possibilia has a desire, a natural appetency, a real amatness in its essence. Further, when that essence is actualized, the amatness of the essence is complete, and this is a kind of perfection of its being, just in virtue of its existence, its essential exact actualization. This is something that we can be aware of when we experience anything that exists. When we're aware of any existing thing, we're aware of an essence that aims at or aims towards, desires its own existence. When we know an existing thing, we are aware of the completion and the perfection of an essence. This awareness of a natural fulfillment of amatness, natural appetency or desire, is what Aquinas means by goodness presenting the aspect of desirableness, which being existence, understood merely as essential exemplification, does not. It's that fulfillment of the natural amatness of a thing. When that's fulfilled, that's its perfection. So one might exist to this idea that an essence understood as a possibilia, or rather a possible essence that could be instantiated in an actual object, but is not, by saying that since this essence doesn't exist, then it cannot have an amatness at all. Now, this would be quite right if essences didn't exist uninstantiated or as intentional possible states of affairs as objects of thought, maybe in the mind of God. The debate over uninstantiated essences, essentially a Platonic and Aristotelian debate, is one I don't want to get into here. However, regardless of how this debate sorts itself out, it seems reasonable to say that in the course of ordinary human experience, we can conceive of essences which haven't been instantiated. For example, the essence of a California burrito. At one time, that was not instantiated, but it could have been thought of. In fact, everything that we create is one time thought of before it's created. Necessarily so. Otherwise, it's not a creation. Of course, artifacts are essentially different kinds of things with natural essences than natural essences, which human beings do not think of prior to their instantiation. But when it comes to artifacts, we clearly do think of their essences before we instantiate them. And when we do, those objects of thought, those intentional essences, do have an amatness to be instantiated. That is what makes them possibly real objects. It seems possible, though I don't want to enter a longer analysis of the details of how this works, to say that natural essences as well, the essences of a carbon atom, or essence of an oak tree, or our human essences, and now this is really important for the founders, right? We were created, endowed by our Creator. So clearly in the Declaration, this is the case. I think you need a separate argument for the existence of God for that, metaphysically and theologically, I think, as well. But barring that, we can reserve the question of how things came into being to have essences. But to say that natural essences as well come into being by divine agency in an analogous way to the process by means of which the essences of artifacts are instantiated. I think there's an analogy there. So returning to our actual experiences of essences being instantiated, when we focus our minds on this way in which an essence has an amatness, we can see the way in which there's a twofold nature of goodness as completion or perfection, the amatness of any essence. First, there's the goodness that is present in the completeness of the very act of being. We can focus on this, on an aspect of actualization of an essence that simply is an amatness, or aim toward, or desirability, present within any actualized essence to be what it fully is as a completed perfection. This is the essence of good. Good is essential exemplification viewed as completion of possible perfection of an essence. So when we see what existence itself is, essential actualization, we see that the amatness of any actualized essence is fulfilled, completed, and perfected, fully actualized with respect to its existence. Thus, from the first way of Aquinas to the identity of being good, all goodnesses are that which aim at. We see that the goodness is the amatness of all things that exist. Since existence is essential actualization, and since the actualization of any essence is the fulfillment of the amatness of an essence, we simply use the term good to refer to this reality. Now, if you go the other way, the converse of all goodness are that which are desirable or aim at. If you go the other way, to all the things that aim at are good. From the first way, we are aware of something similar. We recognize that all aim atness, or desires, appetency, however you want to put it, when real, are good. This is not something we invent. Now, this is really important. It's not something we invent. It's something we recognize. Right? This is where the founders talk about, right? These things are self-evident. We recognize, we identify, we see it. It's directly present before our consciousness. It's self-evident in that way. Goodness understood as the fulfillment of amatness exists in the very fabric of reality, in what is. So when we say that X is good, we recognize the fulfillment and actualization of an amatness of an essence. Thus, good is essential actualization viewed as a completion of a possible perfection of an essence. Thus, the premises of the four ways that contain the predicate goodness can be established without any need for additional argument. They are established as true by direct experiences of the nature of being itself. Therefore, with respect to logical validity and soundness of the four ways to good, not only can we know well, but we can also know that the arguments to the good are good. So to wrap up, that when the founders say that we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, all of that can be defended philosophically from a robust account of the nature of existence as essential actualization, and a way of thinking about the identity of actualization, essential actualization, with a kind of fulfillment of a natural appetency, a natural aim-atness of being, and that in turn is identical to goodness. Now, once you've got that, now you've got some serious philosophical, unalienable rights. Can't be taken away. All right, so I think we'll wrap that up. Next video, another video we'll do on how you get from being and good to being good. Right? So in other words, if I say, okay, yeah, I recognize that I have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but how do I become the kind of person who fully lives that out? That's what we'll look at. Thanks for watching.
Stay psyched, Grom. You.